So, if you guys have been paying attention to the war in pop culture, you know that I've been very critical of most mainstream productions of popular entertainment franchises. We've criticized Star Wars heavily, both on and off camera. We've also discussed Ghostbusters. We've also discussed Marvel and DC. We've covered tokenization of characters and just the whole general agenda driven politics that are being injected into these popular franchises. It's very clear at this point that Hollywood is in need of competition. And the title of this video is as what we're going to be covering, which is fan made entertainment will eventually rival mainstream entertainment. This is going to be reflective of shows, movies, comics, maybe even video games someday. I know the video game industry has its own myriad of problems, but I want to focus specifically on the movies, TV shows, and comics. I have been paying more attention to the productions of fans, specifically, for example, RoseBlood. You've already heard me talk about RoseBlood plenty of times on this channel. We had an interview with Peter Anthony. We did a watch along that was one of our highest rated videos on this channel. I'm very happy about that, and I want to thank everyone that tuned in and supported us for that because it was phenomenal how many views we got, and it was really great to have Peter Anthony discuss Roseblood with us. And Roseblood is just one example of many, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video because I'm pretty much done with most mainstream Hollywood entertainment, with the exception of, for example, Cobra Kai. Uh, Cobra Kai is definitely a rare gem in this field because the show is doing what the Star Wars sequel trilogy should have done with the legacy characters. What Cobra Kai has done is it's honoring the classic characters that we remember from the first three films while also giving us new characters that we can be invested in. And it's good to see that. It's just we need to see more of it. And it's not going to happen unless Hollywood begins to see that there are other companies, other people doing things that are rivaling them, which is why I look at Roseblood. I know that a lot of people have been very critical of Roseblood, saying that it was an average film. Me personally, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 10 out of 10. When I first watched it, I was heavily invested in the story. I was curious to see where Tina's story was going to go. We have our new character in Rose, who's similar to Tina with the psychic abilities. Having Jason not pop up for a majority of the film, waiting until the end to reveal him, was a very bold and smart choice because most Friday the 13th films, including fan films, you expect Jason. And when you go into a Friday film, there's a lot of tropes that you expect that are typical of that franchise. But what Roseblood did was flip the script. They didn't show Jason right away. They built up to it. They gave us characters that you could love, that you can hate, and getting you invested in the story and the relationship between Rose and Tina, which was really good because it's important to have character development and characters that you can be invested in the story. And while most Friday films are not known or watched for their character, aside from Jason, right? Uh, Roseblood did a really good job of getting us invested in other characters. You feel something when they die, especially with the general. The general was the big asshole, and then he got his comeuppance. And then, of course, Rose was on the walking the line of good and evil, and then she dies at the hands of Jason. And then when Michael shows up, that was a really big moment for us. Uh, if you remember our little watch along, my reaction was just complete and utter shock. And this is going off of the hype of Halloween Kills. So seeing Michael Myers show up in this fan film was a complete surprise, and it was really well done. Um, Looking back at the film, there are many different little hints throughout the story that show that Michael's going to show up. And at first, I didn't notice it. I didn't notice these Easter eggs, but going back now, I'm starting to see them more, and it helps that when I watch our interview and hearing what Peter is saying about these little Easter eggs and references, now I see it, and then it clicks, right? So I was really impressed with the fan film overall, and it gave me a better understanding that we need more people, more fans to develop projects. And I'm not talking about just fan films for the popular franchises that already exist. I'm talking about new things, which is something that I'm actually working on myself. If you've been paying attention to our Facebook group, the Dark Ether Files podcast, I announced that we are doing a series, a comic series that I'm in development called Echo 115. And I'm not going to go into complete details here. I'll have a dedicated video or post specifically for that series. But for now, I can say that it was a motivation for me to create this series. What motivated me was what we've been talking about, these popular franchises that were once beloved, that were popular, and there was a lot of story to get invested in. And more recently, they've just been going down the crap hole. And it was sort of upsetting and slightly depressing because you grew up with some of these franchises, and to see them fall from grace at the hands of those that don't really care about these franchises, that care about pushing identity politics. We were in desperate need of real entertainment, something that people can get invested in, and it can provide some entertainment, distraction, maybe even hope for some people, because there are franchises and things in entertainment that have helped people in the real world. And that's something that I treasure. Something that gives you inspiration to do your own things in the real world is very good, very impressive for a franchise to do something that inspires people. So I want to go towards that direction. And I also want to provide people with an alternate source of entertainment. One of the biggest inspirations for Echo 115 is from Doctor Who. And Doctor Who was great at one point. My first experience with Doctor Who was watching David Tennant's 10th Doctor. And ever since then, I had been hooked. I've seen almost every episode from the revived series, starting from 2005 with Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor. But I haven't watched the 13th Doctor, save for one episode. And for the rest of that, I've watched people talk about it, review the episodes that have come up, and it's a shit show. The series has gone downhill so bad. They have retconned the Doctor Who series entirely, including Classic Who and the New Who. And when I heard what they did, it was like a gut punch, because they're retconning a 60-plus-year-old story, and it was just crap. And on top of that, you have the identity politics shoved in, so it just makes it unpleasant to watch. So I was thinking about Echo 115 for years. And then the final straw that broke the camel's back was what happened to Doctor Who. So I started thinking about story points, characters, and now I have a full story that's ongoing, in development. I'm now starting to do more concept art for the different characters that I've written, and it's a very big project. It's a very ambitious project. It's something that I wanna see flourish, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to make that happen. I've been talking with my co-host, Special Agent Carter Sauce, been getting some ideas from him. He's been providing some really great details and ideas that I'm going to be utilizing. I've also been getting help from fellow YouTuber Bacon Pew Pew. He's been really helpful in giving me some ideas for this series, giving me some helpful advice on art and such. So a big thanks to him for providing some of those details for me. So I'm going full forward with this. I'm very much motivated to provide an alternate means of entertainment because at some point in the future, the proverbial pendulum will swing in the opposite direction from where it is now. And when that happens, I want to be there when people are looking for alternatives, when people are done with the crap that Hollywood and other mainstream entertainment is, you know, crapping out on an assembly line. We need more entertainment. Another big motivation for doing Echo 115 is from another YouTuber, Eric July. Uh, you've seen us talk about him on the channel before, particularly on the war and pop culture. He's doing his own superhero comic book series, and hearing him, and all his wisdom about the comics industry and how he's seen the downfall of Marvel and DC comics, it also, it became very much apparent that more people need to get involved in the comic space and provide alternatives. And so I'm throwing my hat in on this as well. And I'm getting started now so that way when everything does go the other way, people have an alternative that they can look to. This series that I'm developing isn't a superhero series per se. You could argue that the main character is like a superhero in many respects, though this is much more inspired by Doctor Who, as I said, and Doctor Who is not a superhero in the traditional sense either. The Doctor has been referenced as a hero in many cases, and my main character will also be in that sort of field of a hero-esque figure or savior. But it's much more of a mature, darker series. There's some horror elements mixed in. There's going to be some hero-esque elements mixed in as well. A lot of it's going to be like creature features. I took inspiration from Supernatural, for example, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or having these stories where you have these extravagant and freaky creatures on Earth and they're terrorizing people. And you have to have this otherworldly being come in to save you. It'll be entertaining. In this first episode, and I'm calling them episodes. I know that it will be the first issue for a comic series, but I'm also thinking about these stories in episodes and seasons. That's just how I keep track of things. But this first episode will be the pilot, the introductory episode to get people hooked. And I'm really hoping that people will enjoy it. I'm sure they will. You're going to always have people that are going to love it, hate it. It's par for the course, but the idea is to not only be an alternative, but to make good quality entertainment. You go to alternatives, you want to support these alternatives because they're good, not just because they're alternatives. You don't want to support something that's bad, even though it's an alternative. It's like, well, it's better than what the other guys are making. No, we want to come in with the idea that we're going to be providing an alternative that's also good, that can rival these other companies. And maybe it will get them back on track. Then again, maybe not. Maybe it will just, fall by the wayside while other franchises are built up and surpass the old guard, so to speak. We're sort of seeing this with manga and anime, where manga is outselling a lot of mainstream comics here in the States, which is a good and bad thing. It's a good thing because it tells everyone that a lot of what Marvel and DC are making is garbage. At the same time, it's also a bad thing because the comics industry here, we're getting our asses kicked by foreigners, you know, um, which, again, good and bad. There's a lot of positives because you get alternate forms of entertainment, which is what we've been talking about. At the same time, it shows the decline of our Western society in regards for quality with what we're making. And it also doesn't help that a lot of these movies that are inspired by these comics are bare bones. They also appeal to people that aren't familiar with the comics. So these movies get popular and these characters that you've never heard of get popular because of these films. For example, Miles Morales Spider-Man. You've heard me be very critical about Miles Morales. His comics aren't the best, and I was never into the idea of an alternate version of Spider-Man in the first place. My Spider-Man is always Peter Parker, and I never really found it necessary to have multiple versions of one character. It's really ridiculous, if I'm being honest. But Miles Morales is now more popular now because of the into the Spider-Verse animated film, because a whole bunch of people just found this character in this movie, and therefore they like him, but they don't really know too much about him from the comics, and that's why that character's popular now. But he wasn't popular in his own comic. It wasn't selling very well from what I heard, but here we are. You have mainstream Hollywood that appeals to blind consumers in many cases. Although I have been noticing more of a trend that people are starting to become wise to what's going on. But regardless, it is upsetting because you don't want to see these franchises fail. I sure as hell don't. I don't like being angry at franchises I'm supposed to love. Um, I've been very critical of Loki, the Loki series on Disney Plus. They mishandled that character so bad in his own TV series. I have no real motivation to watch any more Marvel related projects. After Spider Man No Way Home, which was a decent film, I had to remember that these are the same people that made all these other series, shows that I didn't like. And these are also the same people that called fans like me, people who have been critical of these series, racist or sexist for any number of reasons. Oh, you don't like a female lead TV show, or you don't like the idea of a person of color, you know, being the lead role, which is bull, because we've had all of those things within the past 20 years, 30 years going back. It may not have been as prevalent as it is today, but it happened. And in many cases, people enjoyed what was being put out, because at the time, it was focused more on entertainment rather than trying to put out a political or social political message. But here we are. So the future of entertainment will be fan projects. I'm foreseeing that, not just in the comic book space, but in movies. And as people get more access to funding and technologies, and having good people behind the story, writing it, and focusing on entertainment and not trying to lecture the audience, it will become more clear that Hollywood will go by the wayside in some shape or form. I wouldn't say that Hollywood would disappear completely, because it is still a very popular means of putting out entertainment. What I'm saying is that it's going to become secondhand. There will be others that will rival it, and I'm looking forward to that, because it's about time that there's been a change in the guard where we can actually focus on entertainment. And if you're going to tell good stories, you can inspire people to do the same thing, and it'll be productive overall. So that's all there is to it. Stay tuned also for Echo 115. I'll be giving periodic updates on Patreon. Actually, as of recording this video, I've made our second Patreon post featuring some concept art for 2 characters that are going to be in the series. So if you want to see those exclusive concept art photos, you can go follow us on Patreon, becoming a member for as little as $2, or if you want to go to the higher tier, which is $6. There's a whole bunch of perks there that you can look at. And if it's something that you're interested in, then by all means, please do support us. We will greatly appreciate it, and we would love to have a conversation with you. And special thanks to Mother Molder and J-Man from J-Man's Movie Cave for being a Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate it. And with that all being said, thank you guys very much for watching, listening, and supporting. And until next time, my fellow investigators, remember that the entertainment is out there.
I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
Special Agent Dr. Richtofen.
And until next time, fellow investigators, remember,
The entertainment is out there.